So I'm here today to talk about electronic warfare principles. What exactly is electronic warfare? Well, it's any action involving the use of the electromagnetic spectrum or directed energy to control the spectrum, attack the enemy, or impede enemy assaults via the spectrum. In more simple terms, it's to deny the enemy use of the electromagnetic spectrum for attack, defense, or communications purposes. Now, there's two general ways in which this is accomplished. There's radar electronic warfare, which deals with microwave energy, and there's infrared electronic warfare, which deals with heat signatures. For the purpose of my speech, I'm going to talk about infrared. It's much simpler, and there's a lot less math involved. IR, or heat-seeking missiles, as I'm sure you've heard them referred to, were introduced in the 1950s. They are relatively inexpensive to produce, and they can be launched from a variety of platforms. They can be launched from airplanes, they can be launched from ships, from land-based vehicles, and a soldier can launch a infrared or heat-seeking missile at a multi-million-dollar aircraft and shoot it down effectively. They work on the fact that all warm objects emit IR radiation. The relative signature that an object produces is based on aspect angle, speed, altitude, and engine output. From the aspect angle, the minimum intensity, the minimum signature is at the front. You know, there isn't a lot of surface area. Generally, exhaust gases come out the back. The least heat signature is when viewed from the front. Now, from the side, if viewed from the side, you start to see the exhaust gases coming out the rear. The signature increases. And it's generally greatest from the rear because that's where the engines generally exhaust from. And you'll see on our modern fighters, we expend large amounts of energy to try to diffuse that exhaust gas so that, it creates a lesser signature. Now, airspeed comes into play because as airspeed increases, the friction with the air creates a lot of heat, and this increases the infrared signature of an object. At higher altitude, signatures are more pronounced because there isn't as much air. At sea level where the air is denser, it has an attenuating effect on the infrared signature of anything. In the upper reaches of the atmosphere where there's less air, you don't get this attenuating effect, so the signatures are greater. Guidance units are designed to detect and home in on the IR radiation of an aircraft. The job of the seeker is to view the scene, output an estimated target, and direct itself towards that position. The seeker doesn't see in 360 degrees. It sees just has a small field of vision, and it tries to keep the object in that field of vision. They'll do this by using some sort of sensor and some sort of processor. Now, electronic warfare is how we keep our planes and our air crews from being regularly shot down by enemy missiles. Flares are the number one way that we defeat infrared missiles. This technology has been around for a long time, and it's very effective. A flare is a pyrotechnic device. It's just like its name sounds. It's a firework. It's designed to produce an IR source that is more attractive to the seeker than the IR signature of the aircraft. It does this by looking like the aircraft. It must produce the same wavelength. It must produce a greater amount of heat, and it must do all this very quickly. The most important flare characteristic is the ability of the flare to decoy an IR missile. It does this via wavelength matching, rise time, and burn time. The missile identifies the aircraft by its signature wavelength. You know, they're all slightly different, and the flares that we use to protect each aircraft are specialized for that aircraft to produce the same signature. It must reach its peak burn intensity very quickly because that seeker doesn't have a large field of view. If it doesn't begin to burn very brightly until it's 300 feet away from the airplane, it's completely ineffective because it's out of the view of the seeker missile. And burn time is important for flares too because this determines how long the seeker will be pulled off target. The longer the burn time, the longer it's distracting the missile. There's another way that we fight electronic warfare in the infrared spectrum, and that is through the use of what's called infrared jamming. This is an active technology. It's very complicated and it's very expensive, and the equipment that does it is very heavy. Infrared jamming actively defeats threats by directing a high-intensity laser beam onto the missile seeker head, effectively blinding it. If the camera is the seeker head, this is what it sees in an IR jam. It's pretty much blinded by it. This technology is good at protecting large, slow-moving targets. Cargo planes, Air Force One has this system on it. And it's very expensive and heavy due to the processing equipment and the generating equipment. The technology is fascinating with IR jamming. I don't know how they got to the math where they take the input from 4 or 5 sensors that are mounted around an airplane, determine the position of a missile seeker that is the size of a pop can, basically, and direct a high-intensity laser at that moving target from another moving target over a distance of tens, 20s of miles. It's very effective. It's very expensive, but it's good for protecting large, slow-moving targets. So what electronic warfare really is protection. It's the suit of armor that keeps our airplanes safe. It keeps the enemy soldiers, it keeps the enemy airplanes from shooting down our airplanes. It's protection.